Welcome to the ranch. I am so excited that we are going to be canning today. In this chapter, I'm going to be showing you a method called water bath canning. I'm going to cover what types of foods work best for this water bath canning method, show you the tools you need, and walk you through each step of how to do this method using my barbecue sauce recipe. Let's get started. Water bath is a method where you can can your jams, your relishes, chutneys, pickles, your barbecue sauce, anything that has high acidity. There's just nothing better than to be able to can some tomatoes and then be able to really enjoy those tomatoes in the dead of winter. These are the tools that you are going to need for canning. Jar tongs, you need a lid wand, you need a canning funnel, and a ladle, as well as you're definitely going to need a timer. So this is our canning pot. They're super durable. They last for a really long time. It's very large, so it does fit in all of these different sizes of canning jars, but also it has a rack that fits in. The reason for the rack is that when you're lowering the jars into very, very hot water, you want to make sure that you're able to lower them very, very carefully so as not to break them. Water bath canning is a processing method used for canning high acid foods. Jars are filled with the finished product, covered by a lid, and then submerged in boiling water for the amount of time indicated in the recipe that you are using. I'm going to show you each step of how to do this method using my barbecue sauce recipe. So it's really important that you are picking really good quality canning jars. You can buy this at a hardware store, you can buy this at the grocery store. These are great, but really it's not something to use any sort of jar. You want to make sure that you're using canning jars and that you're using really good quality canning lids, because this is what is really going to seal and really preserve the food. It's also important that you never reuse these. Once you've used them, you can't use them again. With the jar and with the bands, you definitely can use them again. We have to make sure that you're picking out a jar that it's not too old or has cracks. So one thing you really want to make sure is that you wash these jars very well with hot soapy water. This is not sterilizing, it's just making sure that they're really clean. And you can just set them aside. With canning, you're preserving food. So it's really about safety to make sure that everything is really clean before you even start your process. Okay, so those are nice and clean, and now we're going to fill up the canning pot with hot water. I'm gonna fill it with warm water. And while I'm filling it, I'm actually gonna put in my jars now. So I usually fill it up with nice warm water and put it down at the bottom while it's still filling. So based on the size of your canning pot is about how many jars that you can fit. So these are half-pint jars, and I can usually fit about 8 or 9. Today I'm just gonna do about 5. Depending on the size of your jar, you are going to make sure that you put 2 inches of water over the jar. So it's pretty heavy, but you can do it. I don't know what to say about it. So we've got it on the stove. Now is the time that we are going to bring our jars to a boil so they get nice and hot. One thing that's really important when you are opening your canning pot, that you don't open it toward you, that you open it away from you, because with this steam, it can get really, really hot. It's not at a boil yet, but it is still getting pretty hot, so we're going to let that keep going. And this would be the time that I'm going to make whatever I'm going to be canning for the day. But today, since I really wanted to stay focused on water bath canning and the technique of it all, I've already made some barbecue sauce. This barbecue sauce is a perfect example of a great high acidity food that's perfect for a water bath canner. We're going to check on these jars. Let's come to a nice boil. We can turn off the heat. What we're doing is we're not sterilizing these. We are just making sure that they come to a really hot temperature. And I'm going to keep that on. So I like to put in the bands as well as the lids in here so they start warming, and this will help with the sealing process. Then I'm going to go over here and make sure that the barbecue sauce also comes up to a high heat. This barbecue sauce is looking so good and it's ready to go. It's nice and hot. Okay. So before I start, I will dampen my cloth and have that ready to go. Okay, let's get started. So I'm just gonna do one jar at a time. I'm gonna get in there really carefully, pour out all of that water, close the pot so it stays nice and warm, and place the jar right near the barbecue sauce. I'm gonna put this canning funnel right on top. So you can see the barbecue sauce is nice and hot, the jar is nice and hot. One of the most important things is that you don't want to have quick heat changes or it could also crack the jar. So you want to make sure that you move pretty quickly. What's also very important, when you're putting the barbecue sauce in the jar, you want to make sure that you don't fill this up all the way to the top or you don't fill it up enough. With each recipe, it's a little bit different, but how much space is between the lid and where your barbecue sauce ends. So with this recipe, it is 1/4 of an inch. I usually just use a wooden skewer. So in this, we can fill it up a little bit more. So I filled this up a little bit too high. Just gonna take it back a notch. It really matters how high because it's all about the seal and making sure that this seals properly. Also, before I put it in, I usually go around to make sure that there are no bubbles. You don't wanna have any bubbles in your sauce because that can also lead to the jar cracking while it's heating up. We're gonna make sure it's really nice and clean with a wet cloth so it can seal really well. Okay. So now I'm gonna use my lid wand. I'm gonna pull out a lid. You only need one. These are nice, they're fun, kids love them. And we've cleaned this really, really well. So that is really important that this is all clean, and I'm gonna put this on top. I'm gonna grab a band. And I'm gonna put it right on top. You can just tighten it until you meet with a little bit of resistance. Now we're gonna throw it back into the canning pot. And start the process over. Taking out the really hot jar, we're gonna fill it up with hot barbecue sauce. We're gonna leave 1/4 inch of headspace. We're gonna make sure it's really nice and clean. If you don't clean this really well, it could not seal properly. And if it doesn't seal properly, you can't have it have a shelf life. If it doesn't seal properly, I would say to throw it in the fridge and eat it within the week. It's not bad, it's not going to preserve like it should. Wizards and me. Here we go. And now we're gonna put this on. We're gonna turn it until we feel just a little resistance, and then we're gonna move it back into the hot bath. So this next part is called processing. It's when we process our jars and actually bring it to the finished product. For barbecue sauce, we'll be processing the jars for 20 minutes at a rolling boil. But depending on your recipe, you may be processing for a different amount of time. So you just wanna make sure that you look at the recipe and make sure that you start the time as soon as it gets to a rolling boil. Check it out. We're now at a rolling boil. So we're gonna set that timer for 20 minutes. with the recipes, a lot of things can sound approximate, but with this part, it is really, really imperative that you are doing the correct amount of time for this processing part. So we are doing 20 minutes. This is to ensure that you are going to have a really solid seal. The timer went off, and now we're ready to take them out. So I'm going to turn off the heat. They look beautiful. They look perfect. It hasn't exploded. Everybody's good. So depending on what jars and lids that you use, it should be totally great on the shelf for 6 months to a year. I hear them popping. That means that they're sealing. So you can actually see right here, some of them has a little mound, and that doesn't. And that means that that is sealed, and that one has not sealed yet. You really want to make sure that you put it in a spot where you don't need to touch them for about 24 hours so that they have time to seal, because they will either pop right now like they're already doing. See it? It's already popping. It makes me very happy. Or they'll pop within the first 24 hours. If you check them in 24 hours and they still have not popped, it means that the seal is not good, and it's fine. The food is good. Just throw it in the fridge, though, and eat it within the next couple days. So now these have been sitting for 24 hours. You can tell that they have all sealed because the mound is gone and they've all popped, which means that they have sealed perfectly. Now is the time to do a label. The labels are very important that you do because it will tell you what is in it and when you actually made it. I pretend to myself that I will remember, but I never do, so it's so important to do a label. I also have a label that I print out that just says our ranch's name, and whenever I give them as gifts, people know where the canning jar came from. And there you go. This jar is ready to put up on the shelf. I'll have barbecue sauce all year long. I can give it out to my friends and family. It's just a perfect gift and also a great way to save the season. So in this chapter, you have learned everything there is to know about water bath canning, from the tools to the method. I know that you can do this at home. Enjoy, have fun, and get canning.